So, everybody has their own little thing that they've been looking into when it comes to October 7th and all this aftermath that has been following it. For me, it was learning the other side of where this all started. That's why instead of going and doing like everybody else and just researching all the history of terrorism on the Islam side, which there's all kinds of information out there about it. It's really easy to find. I mean, there's thousands upon thousands of YouTube videos about it. So I was curious about the Zionist side, which ironically that all started because I'm working on a book that it's not necessarily a factual book, but it's based on facts of an incident that took place in 1968. So it's going to be a kind of a, it's not really fiction, but it's not really nonfiction because there are actual facts in the story. The story is built off of actual facts, but I embellished the story, and there's going to be somebody in the story that, in my story, they're going to die, but in reality they lived. So, there's going to be a couple little things that are going to be different where people that, survivors of the incident, they're going to know. But it's to bring the story to light because people have been trying to get answers, and they've been trying to get the guilty party prosecuted for decades. And so, I figured, so I'm working on a story, but it's a lot of it, most of the story, most of the background of the story is actually factual. But that led me down this other road because I got thinking, I was like, man, the Abrahamic religions are so violent. And then I was like, well, no, the Jews aren't violent. And then I went down this rabbit hole of Zionism, and Judea isn't violent, but Zionism now. It's been a hell of a rabbit hole. But I've also been keeping up with, I'm watching a lot of Israeli news especially, but I watch, other news stations. I watch a news station out of France. I watch one out of Belgium. I watch some out of England. Actually watch very little BBC as far as this is concerned, ironically. But every now and then, I-24, they do these propaganda pieces. They're actually just propaganda pieces. So, first, everybody, was bringing up that, Egypt told Israel about this well in advance. Now it's turning out that Israel is probably known for well over a year. But there's more to it than just that, because there's a lot of things that, you don't know. If all you watch is American news media, you don't know. For example, one of the things that has been a question even by Israelis, including on I-24, which I-24, it's really an Israeli propaganda station. And in the very beginning, even I-24, they were asking the serious question, where were all the guards, all the troops? Because this area of southern Israel along the Gaza Strip, that it's always been known to be a problem. So, there's all these questions that have been slowly building up, and it's starting to build this narrative. And some people, I've even hinted at it, that they have this conspiracy theory that Israel knew this was going to happen, and they knew it would be an opportunity for them to take advantage of. And I was against that. the thing is, there are questions now that are starting to rise that they point to that. Now, I don't think Israel at all intended for what to happen. And even there's an IDF colonel that he's at least twice now on I-24 has started bringing up this issue that they don't think Hamas, its objective and what happened, they seem to be worlds apart. And you have to ask yourself, well, why would they even start thinking that in the first place? Why would this IDF colonel even start thinking about this? Why would this IDF colonel start bringing this up? And now that the hostages starting to be released, we're finding out that it's actually kind of what that colonel has been hinting at is also what a lot of these hostages are also saying. Because they're pointing out, like, especially from the music festival, and it turns out there's a reason. It looks like the music festival first got caught in the crossfire of Hamas, because between where Hamas was leaving and the military installation that was Hamas's target was the music festival. And so that's how that all rolled up into there. Then what happened was they did take hostages. They took hostages. They went to the military base. They attacked the military base. There was casualties and there was hostages taken. And then they went back into Gaza. The hostages have said this. They said that when they went back, as they were going back into Gaza, that's when people started flooding from Gaza into where this music festival took place. And then that's when all the atrocities that we're learning about really started to take place. There were people that were killed. People got caught in the crossfire. And, but for example, the girl on the motorcycle, she was not kidnapped by Hamas. She was kidnapped by somebody from the group that came out after Hamas had already left. The hostages have given a timeline that confirms this. The hostages have also confirmed that some of them were taken hostage while the IDF was engaging them. And there's one girl, she was in a kibbutz. She says, the fire damage isn't from Hamas. The fire damage is from Israel, the IDF, shelling the homes. She was escaping out of a back window. Hamas happened to be there. They grabbed a hold of her, dragged her out the window. They wound up saving her life because as they pulled her away from the house, it got shelled by the IDF and all her family got killed. I'm not trying to paint the terrorists in a good light. That's not what that statement's for. But it's the irony that they wound up saving her life by taking her hostage. If she had went back into the house, she would have been killed by the IDF. And there's others that, they've said that, all the atrocities that took place after Hamas, like all the raping. So, there's lots of questions about all this. And on its face, it's like, okay, well, there's this big fog of war. There's all this confusion. So you could start painting that picture. But then you have to bring Zaka into the picture. Zaka are the people that are recovering the bodies. There was a piece done on I-24 about Zaka. And Zaka was explaining how they identify the bodies. And one of the guys from Zaka, he explained how they found a body and they marked him as a Hamas terrorist. The reason they marked him as a Hamas terrorist was he had the uniform of Hamas, he had paperwork that Hamas terrorists were found with, and he had weaponry just like that of Hamas terrorists. He wasn't Palestinian. He turned out to be an Israeli citizen of that kibbutz. That kibbutz. The reason they figured this out was during the autopsy, they found that he had a very peculiar surgery. It's apparently not a very common surgery. And then they wound up through a medical record cross-reference with this particular surgery, they were able to identify the guy. They haven't released his identity. I'm still trying to figure this out. I'm still trying to find his identity. And I'm actually having a hard time finding anything else about that story other than what this one guy from Zaka mentioned. And it seems to be covered up. Nobody's talking about this story, about this guy who everybody thought was Hamas terrorist. And it raises the question, was he actually working with Hamas? But then it raises another question, because we come back to all these details that are coming out about, forget about the whole idea that the Hannibal objective was fired up. Just leave all that on the side. Just go back to the fact that Israel appears to have known about this for a year. Mossad has appeared to known about this for a year. There are emails that go back throughout the year showing that there's been multiple emails about this. There's been multiple communications within the government about this. And so now, you have to start questioning, was the guy actually a Mossad agent working undercover in Hamas? Now, there's multiple reasons why they need to hide that if that is the fact. Because one, if he was an agent, you don't want Hamas knowing that someone actually slipped through their grip. Second, if he was an agent, the government don't want the people knowing that they knew this was going to happen. And you can bring up the question, well, why would they let this happen? Like I said, I don't think anybody planned for this to go as sideways as it went, even Hamas. And like I said, there's people in the IDF and people with communication with the IDF that have been bringing this up, that this went sideways for both sides. What happened was not Hamas's objective. The whole interplay with all the civilians, Hamas did not plan for that. That was never part of the plan. It just wound up being at the music festival, fell right in their line of attack. And that's how, and this is said by the IDF colonel. An IDF colonel has said this twice now. And both times he said it, and both times he started talking about it, the subject has been changed. But it raises the question, why would the government allow it to happen? So, it looks like the government might have allowed this to happen. Because like I said, this kibbutz, especially the one with all this damage, the one that got attacked the worst, is normally very well covered. All those kibbutz down there are normally very well patrolled and covered. There was almost nobody there. Almost no one at all. And it doesn't even, you can't even explain it away by saying, well, it was a holiday. Because they plan for holidays. Actually, holidays, some of these more remote places are even more covered. They have more troops there. So it's not like there's any reasonable explanation why all these soldiers were gone. You also need to understand, all the kibbutz that got attacked, they tend to be, the majority of the people living in them kibbutz tend to be pro-Palestinian. They're anti-Zionist, the majority of them. They don't believe in what the Israeli government is doing to the Palestinian people. So, you have this whole, you start, a good conspiracy theory is full of truths. The problem is, a really good government operation reads like a conspiracy theory. And when you know the history of Hamas and you understand Hamas has no issue with using its own civilians to create a red flag operation. It's been caught doing it. It's been caught doing this. That's the thing. It's not like this has not ever happened before. It's been caught doing these kind of operations. I mean, and we're not talking about just recently. I mean, you can go back. The U.S. government has taken part in some of these operations. Lebanon, 1985. What was it? 70, 80, 90? Less than 100 people, but it was a pretty good number, were killed in a car bomb. They targeted the wrong person. And on top of that, the person they targeted didn't even get, I don't even think he got injured. But they killed about almost 100 people, and they injured well over, it's something like 130, 140 other people. And the United States and Israel, with Saudi Arabia, did that. They planted the car bomb. They did it. So, I mean, this goes back, and it goes back even further than that. You go back into the 70s. There's red flag operations that, it's been hard to prove that they're red flag operations, but they have all the signatures of red flag operations. So we come back to this now. Nobody's talking about this guy. That's a pretty big story. This guy is a resident of the kibbutz. He's wearing a Hamas outfit. He's carrying Hamas weaponry. He's got Hamas documentation on his persons. Was he part of Mossad? Or was he the one that really gave all the information that Hamas needed to know about the kibbutz? And did they go in, and was the main objective originally targeting soldiers? Did they intentionally thin the guard so that this could take place? And then everything went haywire because nobody, somewhere, the one thing that might have got lost in all this operation that nobody thought about was Hamas taking out that communication tower. Hamas took out that communication tower, and it just put the whole country into haywire because communications, the whole communication system failed apparently in Israel because of this. So if that wasn't part of the calculation, then you get all this other crazy stuff going on. And then who killed the Israeli that looked like a Hamas? Was he killed by the IDF? Or was he killed by Hamas? Did Hamas figure out who he was and killed him? It still comes back to the same question, though. Why is nobody talking about the Israeli that was so easily mistaken as Hamas? It has all the signature of a red flag operation. It's just far enough on the fringe where, I mean, even me, the more and more that, I'm following this trail, and I've been following this for a while now, and I've heard the conspiracy theories, but nobody's talked about this guy. I like I said, I only learned about this on the Israeli news. I didn't learn about this on American news. I didn't learn about this in French news. I didn't learn about this in Irish news. I didn't learn about this in Turkish news. I learned about this in Israeli news. And I don't see anybody else talking about it. And I can't find any independent reports about this. So, really begs the question, who the hell was this guy? And what did Israel really know? And did Israel take part in this? Because like I said, I don't even think Even for a red flag operation, it would have never let it go that far. This just went totally sideways for everybody involved. And if Mossad was involved, it went totally sideways for them too. And like I said, you have people in the IDF that they keep bringing up that this wasn't... Why would they even bring that up? What kind of information do they have access to that they would keep bringing up that this was not even Hamas's objective? That this whole thing went sideways, and that's how all this came into play. All this aftermath came into play because of basically... I've pointed to it before. It's like watching a repeat of the Red Army marching in on Berlin. When you take such an oppressed people and you let them confront their oppressors, and those oppressed people have nothing and they're having everything, what little they have, being taken away from them, and then they see the oppressors and they see the way the oppressors are living, and then this red rage. And it's a known phenomenon. Like I said, World War II is one of the best covered about that phenomenon. I mean, it's kind of, psychiatrists, numerous psychiatrists have written that as one of their case study papers, even going through college when they have to do, a case study. Numerous psychiatrists have covered the whole Berlin case with the Red Army. And that's what it comes down to, is you take these extremely oppressed people, and that's the aftermath. In every case where you look at an extremely oppressed people, that is the aftermath. Nat Turner. Same outcome. Same kind of atrocities. Some parts of the uprising during the South African apartheid, you had the same outcomes and the same atrocities. So looking at what's going on there right now, it's not a stretch to understand. I'm not condoning it. That's not condoning it, but you need to understand where the rage even came from in the first place. And you need to understand the history of what's going on to understand the oppression. And once you understand the oppression, then you can understand the rage. And like I said, the whole thing starts because first you have Israel oppressing them, and then you have Hamas oppressing them on top of that. So they got all this pent-up anger, and all they want to do is rage on one of the oppressors. And they wind up there. They wind up on the other side of the fence. And the worst part is, the people that were really fighting hard for them are the ones that got caught in the crossfire of that rage. It should have been Hamas caught in that rage. Or it should have been them wackos, like Ben Gvir and all his cronies that are following him. That should have been caught in that rage, not those people. And I'm not condoning it, but, if anybody deserved it, there are people that, no matter how you want to look at it, you're going to say, everything happens because God wills it. It should have happened to them. God should have willed it on them people, not the people defending the Palestinians. So, that's what makes this whole thing. This is just tragic on so many different levels. And like I said, now you throw this guy in the mix, and it really does. It raises the question, did Israel know? We know that they knew, but did they know? How much did they know? And we know they knew a lot more than they're letting on, because, more and more documents are coming out that are being leaked that are showing that, like all these email communications, some of them involving Mossad. So, all these documents are starting to be leaked. All this stuff is starting to come out. It's only making the question more and more important. And then you put this guy in the mix. And like I said, they still haven't released his identity. Not that I can find. I keep looking, and I can't. I keep trying to rephrase my Google searches on this guy because I know how he was found. I know he was mistaken as a Hamas terrorist, and I know that he's an Israeli citizen. I know he lived in the kibbutz where he was found, and I know it's because of a Israeli medical procedure that they know he was an Israeli. They were able to cross-reference and identify him as an Israeli after having his body tossed in with all the terrorists. I mean, in all honesty, this might be, if there is a conspiracy here, that he might be what breaks the whole conspiracy open. Identifying that man, it will prove either there's a conspiracy. I mean, especially if it turns out that he's someone really, with ties to Mossad or ties to a special force of the IDF. Someone like a 101 or something like that. I mean, someone who's kind of like a Navy SEAL. So they deep undercover, and they have no connection with Mossad, but if they're coming from one of these special force groups, you really want somebody deep undercover, you're not going to have any connection with them to your agencies. The United States does it too. We have deep undercover operatives that have no connection at all that can be traced back to the CIA, but they're CIA operatives. It's how you... It's espionage, and it's how you do a double agent, triple agent, quadruple agent. So, lots of questions. And this guy just opened up a whole can of worms. And I'm going to keep trying to find information on him. And if I find the information on him and it turns out that it's nothing, then, it's nothing. But if it turns out that it's something, but until we learn this guy's identity, there's no way to know. But it's a hell of a question. And there's a lot of questions around October 7th. And there's too many pieces that just... they don't make sense to begin with. And now you're taking a situation where, like I said, it's the perfect red flag operation if it is, because it's just on the fringe enough where it really does look like a conspiracy theory. And maybe it is. I'm not saying it's not a conspiracy theory, but there's a lot of questions.